My brother told me admit it or I will call the police after blaming me for draining the family account. I just said do it when the police got him instead. My parents could only stare in silence. I live in Columbus, Ohio, and I've been mostly independent since I was 18. I say mostly because there was a stretch in college where I ate ramen 4 nights a week and occasionally accepted a care package from my mom. But I paid my own tuition, worked part-time at a tax prep office, and graduated without asking my parents for a dime beyond the occasional box of granola bars. My brother Derek is 3 years younger than me. Derek is the kind of guy who walks into a room and immediately becomes the most interesting person in it. Always has been. He's good-looking, funny, quick on his feet, sells pharmaceuticals for a living, and makes solid money doing it. If you met him at a barbecue, you'd probably think he was great. Most people do. Growing up, Derek was the favorite. I don't say that with any bitterness. Okay, maybe a little, but it's just a fact. My mom, Linda, is a retired school librarian, sweet as anything. But she's got this blind spot the size of a parking garage when it comes to Derek. He was the baby. He was the one who needed more help, more attention, more support. I was the quiet one who handled things on my own. So everyone just assumed I was fine. My dad, Ray, is retired postal service. Good man. 65, bad knees, early diabetes. He loves us both. I believe that. But he spent his entire marriage deferring to my mom on family stuff. If Linda says the sky is green, Ray's reaching for a paint swatch to match. Here's the thing about my family. We're not dramatic. We're not the kind of people who throw plates or have screaming matches at Thanksgiving. We're the kind of people who let things fester quietly until the rot is so deep, nobody can fix it. Passive-aggressive texts, long silences. I'm fine when nothing is fine. That's our brand. For years, I've kept a comfortable distance. I visit for holidays. I call my mom every couple of weeks. I send birthday cards. I'm not estranged. I'm just separate. I built my own life, and I like it. I've got a townhouse with a yard. I actually maintain a job. I'm proud of a couple of close friends. It's not glamorous, but it's mine. Derek, on the other hand, has been circling the drain financially for years, and nobody talks about it. He married Vanessa 4 years ago. She's 29, works part-time doing social media management for a local boutique, and has champagne expectations on a sparkling water budget. They renovated their kitchen last year. Granite countertops, the works. Derek drives a leased Audi. They took a cruise to the Bahamas for their anniversary. Everything looks perfect from the outside. I know what pharmaceutical reps make. It's good money. It is not Audi plus cruise plus granite money. Not without help. But I minded my own business because that's what I do. That's what our family does. We don't ask questions. I should tell you about one more thing before I get into what happened. Last Thanksgiving, I was at my parents' house and Derek showed up wearing a new watch. I'm not a watch guy, but I know enough to recognize a Tag Heuer when I see one. My mom complimented it. Vanessa said something about how Derek deserved something nice. Nobody asked how he paid for it. I ate my turkey and kept my mouth shut. That's the context. That's the ecosystem. A family where one person's spending is never questioned, and another person's silence is mistaken for not caring. The trouble started about 4 months ago when my dad called me on a Tuesday night. This was unusual. Dad doesn't call. Dad answers calls. Mom calls. That's the system. "Hey, bud," he said, and his voice had that careful walking on eggshells quality that immediately put me on alert. "Got a question for you. Kind of a financial thing." "Sure. When you were over here for Easter, did you, He paused. "Did you happen to use my computer? The one in the den?" I checked my email on it. "What?" Another pause. "Your mother noticed some money moved out of one of our accounts, and she's trying to figure out the timeline." "How much money?" $6, $200. I sat there for a second. "Dad, are you asking me if I took $6, $200 from your bank account?" No, he said quickly. "We're just trying to figure out what happened." Derek thought what? He said you'd asked him about the account, about how the online banking worked. He was just trying to help us trace it. I told my dad clearly and calmly that I had not asked Derek anything about their banking. I had not accessed any financial accounts, and I had no idea what he was talking about. He said, okay. He said he believed me. He said it was probably a bank error and they'd sort it out. I hung up and sat in my kitchen for about 10 minutes running through the conversation in my head. Something was off. Not just the accusation, the framing. Derek thought maybe. Derek was trying to help trace it. Derek was already in the narrative before I even knew there was a narrative. I almost called Derek right then, almost, but something told me to wait. 2 weeks later, I was at my desk on a Wednesday morning, reviewing a client's quarterly filings, when my phone rang. Unknown number. Local area code. "Is this Isaac Mercer speaking, Mr. Mercer? This is Detective Paul Marcos with the Columbus Division of Police. I'm calling regarding a theft report that's been filed, and your name has come up in connection with it. I'd like to ask you a few questions. Would you be available to come into the station this week?" I felt the floor tilt under my chair. A theft report. My name. "Can you tell me who filed the report?" I asked. "I can tell you it involves a complaint from a family member regarding unauthorized access to a financial account. I'd rather discuss the details in person." I told him I'd be there. I hung up. I closed my office door, sat back down, and stared at the wall for a solid 3 minutes. My coworker Cynthia knocked on the glass about 10 minutes later. She's a senior partner at the firm, late 30s. One of those people who notices everything and comments on almost nothing. She opened the door halfway and said, "You look like someone just read you your Miranda rights." Funny you should say that. She stepped in and closed the door. I gave her the short version. She listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I've always respected about her. "You need to go in there with a plan," she said. "Not just an explanation. A plan. I know. And you probably need a lawyer. I know that too." She nodded and left. I sat there for another minute thinking about how my brother had managed to put me in a position where I needed a criminal defense attorney. My brother who I taught to ride a bike. My brother who I'd driven to prom because he'd wrecked his car the week before and our parents didn't have the money to fix it in time. Then I pulled out my personal laptop and started doing what I do for a living. I just didn't know yet how deep the hole actually went. I went to the station on Friday, wore a button-down and slacks because I'm the kind of person who dresses up when a detective wants to talk to me about a felony I didn't commit. Call it a coping mechanism. Detective Marcos turned out to be a stocky guy in his 40s with a shaved head and a calm, no-rush demeanor. He shook my hand, offered me coffee, and led me to an interview room that was exactly as depressing as you'd imagine. "So here's what I've got," he said, flipping open a folder. "Your parents, Ray and Linda Mercer, reported that approximately $6,200 was transferred from a joint checking account without their authorization. The report was filed by your brother Derek Mercer on their behalf." "On their behalf," I repeated. "He came in personally, sat right where you're sitting. He stated that you had access to the household computer during a recent family visit, that you'd asked questions about the banking setup, and that the unauthorized transfers began shortly after. None of that is true." Marcos looked at me steadily. "I'm giving you the opportunity to tell me your side." So I did. I told him I'd used my dad's computer to check email for about 10 minutes on Easter Sunday. I told him I'd never asked Derek or anyone else about their banking. I told him I had no idea what account was involved or how the transfers were made. And I told him what I did for a living. That got a small reaction. Just a flicker of his eyebrows. "Forensic accounting," he said. "Yeah. So I can tell you right now, if you pull the IP logs from those transactions, they won't trace back to any device I own or any network I've used. That's helpful. We're still in the early stages. I'll be in touch." I walked out of that station and sat in my car for 15 minutes. My hands weren't shaking, but they wanted to. The thing that kept cycling through my head wasn't the accusation itself. It was the fact that Derek had walked into a police station and lied about me, formally on the record. That's not a family misunderstanding. That's a deliberate act. I called my mom that night. "Isaac, honey, I know this is upsetting. Mom, did you and Dad file a police report against me?" Long pause. Derek handled it. He was worried. He said it was just to create a paper trail in case the bank needed one. A paper trail that says I stole from you. Nobody's saying you stole anything. Derek just panicked. You know how he gets? He told the detective I asked him about your banking login. That never happened. Well, maybe he got confused. Maybe he misremembered. Mom, he sat in a police station and gave a formal statement. People don't misremember that. She went quiet. Then she said the thing that I think she genuinely believed would fix everything. "Isaac, please don't ruin the family over one mistake." He panicked. That's all. I didn't argue. There was nothing to argue about. She'd already decided what the story was, and in her version, Derek was a well-meaning son who got a little carried away and I was overreacting. "Okay, Mom," I said. "I hear you." I hung up and opened my laptop. Here's where the forensic accountant thing stops being background detail and starts being the actual plot. The first thing I did was request a copy of the police report through the public records process. Took a few days. When it arrived, I read it 3 times. Derek's statement was detailed, too detailed. He didn't just say I'd asked about the banking setup, he described a specific conversation we'd supposedly had in the kitchen on Easter where I'd asked about the account number and whether the online banking used 2-factor authentication. He provided dates for the transfers. He provided amounts. Here's the thing that caught my eye. The report listed the theft amount as $6,200. But in the supplemental notes section, Derek probably didn't realize I'd see there was a reference to a total suspected loss of $47,000. I read that number 4 times. $47,000. My parents are comfortable, but they're not wealthy. My dad's postal pension and my mom's modest retirement savings are their whole safety net. $47,000 is a catastrophic loss for them, and Derek had reported $6,200, not $47,000. Why? Because he didn't want anyone looking too closely at the other $40,800. Because the $6,200 was the withdrawal that got noticed, the one that was big enough and recent enough that my dad actually saw it on a statement. The rest had been bleeding out in smaller amounts over a much longer period. I didn't have access to my parents' bank records. I knew they wouldn't give them to me, not with Derek in their ear telling them I was the problem, but I knew who would eventually have to produce them, the bank. I called Cynthia, my senior partner at the firm. We'd worked together for 6 years. I trusted her judgment more than almost anyone's. "I need a recommendation for a good criminal defense attorney," I told her, "not for a client, for me." She didn't gasp or ask a bunch of questions. She just said, "I'll send you 3 names by tonight." The attorney I chose was a woman named Diane Pallister, mid-50s, former prosecutor, zero tolerance for nonsense. In our first meeting, I laid out everything. If the detective does his job, she said, the bank records will tell the whole story. But we're not going to sit around hoping he does his job. We're going to make sure the right records are preserved. She sent a preservation letter to the bank that same week, a legal hold on all transaction records associated with my parents' accounts for the past 3 years. She also drafted a formal response to the police report categorically denying every claim Derek made and requesting that the investigation include IP verification and device tracing for all flagged transactions. Meanwhile, I did something I'm not proud of, but I'd do again. I went back through my own records, emails, text messages, calendar entries, and built a timeline of every single day I'd visited my parents over the past 3 years. Dates, times, purpose of visit. Then I cross-referenced those with my work travel records, flights, hotel bookings, client meeting schedules. For 9 of the flagged transaction dates, I was in a different state entirely. I sat at my kitchen table at 1:00 in the morning, looking at a spreadsheet that proved my brother had lied about me to the police to cover up the fact that he'd been stealing from our parents for years. And the part that really got me, the part that sat in my chest like a brick, was that my parents were going to fight me on this. They were going to fight me on this because admitting I was right meant admitting what Derek had done, and they weren't built for that. I saved the spreadsheet, I backed it up to 2 separate drives, and then I went to bed because the next part was going to take patience, and patience requires sleep. The next 6 weeks were the hardest stretch of my adult life, and not because anything dramatic happened. The opposite. Nothing happened. That was the point. Diane, my attorney, told me the single most important thing I could do was be boring. Don't confront Derek. Don't have any emotional conversations with my parents. Don't post anything on social media. Don't do anything that could be characterized as retaliatory or unstable by anyone looking to discredit me later. You're building a case file, she said. The best case files are assembled by people who look completely calm from the outside. So that's what I did. I went to work. I came home. I ran my dishwasher and mowed my lawn and watched basketball on Thursday nights. And in the quiet hours between all of that, I built the most thorough financial reconstruction I've ever assembled in my career. Cynthia helped. Not officially. She wasn't involved in any legal capacity, but she'd been doing forensic work for 20 years, and she knew things I didn't. She helped me structure my analysis so it would hold up to scrutiny. Clean documentation, clear source attribution, no gaps. You're treating this like a client case, she said one evening while we were going over my timeline, because that's the only way I know how to handle it. She looked at me for a second. You doing okay? No, but I'm doing this. Here's what I pieced together from the police report, my own records, and some preliminary information Diane obtained through the investigation process. 3 years ago, my mom added Derek to a joint checking account that was linked to my parents' retirement saving. The stated reason was medical emergencies. Dad's diabetes diagnosis had scared her, and she wanted someone to be able to access funds quickly if something happened. She didn't add me. I'm not hurt by that. I live across town, and Derek lives 2 streets over from them. It made logistical sense. What didn't make logistical sense was the pattern of withdrawals that started about 4 months after Derek was added to the account. The transactions were smart, I'll give him that. Most were under $1,000. A few were structured as round numbers, $500, $800. That could look like routine household transfers if you weren't paying attention. Some were masked as payments to vendors that turned out to be Derek's own credit card accounts. He'd move money from the joint account to an intermediary, then use that to pay down his Visa or his car lease. The total over 34 months came to approximately $47,000. My parents never noticed because my mom wasn't checking the account regularly, and my dad left financial management to her. The $6 $200 withdrawal that finally caught their attention was bigger than Derek's usual amounts. He'd gotten either desperate or sloppy, probably both. And when it surfaced, he didn't confess. He pointed at me. Now here's the part that took the longest and required the most patience. I needed the actual bank records to confirm what I'd reconstructed circumstantially. Diane's preservation letter ensured the records wouldn't be purged, but getting access to them required either my parents' cooperation, which I wasn't going to get, or the ongoing police investigation. Detective Marcos, to his credit, was doing his job. He'd requested the records from the bank as part of the investigation. The bank was cooperating, but slowly. Every few weeks, Diane would check in with the detective's office, and every few weeks there'd be another piece. Transaction logs, IP records, device identifiers. Each piece confirmed what I already knew. Meanwhile, I played the part. I called my mom on Sundays. I kept the conversations light, whether her garden, how Dad's blood sugar was doing. She was clearly relieved I wasn't making a thing of it, as she put it during one call. One particular Sunday stands out. Mom was in a good mood because she'd won a pie contest at her church group, Blueberry. She was telling me about the recipe, and I was actually laughing because she kept insisting the secret ingredient was a little bit of love and a whole lot of lemon zest. Normal Motherson stuff. Then right before we hung up, she said, Derek and Vanessa are thinking about having a baby. Wouldn't that be wonderful? I said it would be wonderful because what else are you supposed to say? But I hung up and sat there thinking about Derek bringing a child into a financial house of cards built on money stolen from the kid's own grandparents. And the fact that my mom was already knitting imaginary booties instead of looking at her bank statements. I could hear the tension drain out of her voice each time I didn't bring up Derek or the police report. She wanted to believe it was over. She wanted to believe that silence meant resolution. Derek, for his part, texted me twice during this period, both times casual. One was a link to a football highlight. The other was a photo of a steak he'd grilled with the caption, "Getting good at this." Just a guy being a guy, nothing to see here. I didn't respond to either one. He didn't follow up. That told me everything about how much he actually cared about our relationship versus how much he cared about maintaining appearances. At work, I threw myself into client cases with an intensity that probably concerned some of my colleagues, but it helped. There's something grounding about tracing someone else's financial mess when your own life is a controlled disaster. About 5 weeks in, Diane called me on a Thursday evening. The bank records are in. Detective Marcos is reviewing them. But I got a preview through Discovery channels, and every single flagged transaction traces to a device registered to Derek Mercer. The IP addresses correspond to his home network, and in several instances, his phone's cellular connection. Your name does not appear anywhere in the access logs. Your devices have never been authenticated on that account. I sat down on my couch and pressed my fingers against my eyes. This was what I'd expected. This was what I'd built my entire reconstruction around. But hearing it confirmed hit different than suspecting it. There's something else, she said. Several of the larger transfers were made on dates when you were traveling for work. The detective has already flagged that inconsistency. So what happens now? Now we let the detective finish his report and decide how he wants to proceed. And we wait for the right moment to present your full analysis. How long? Weeks, not months. Be patient. I was patient. I went to work. I came home. I kept calling my mom on Sundays. And then Derek called me, and his voice was warm and casual and completely unbothered, like a man who believed the lie had worked. "Hey man, so mom and dad's anniversary is coming up. 40 years. Vanessa and I are putting together a dinner at that Italian place on 5th, the one with the patio. Saturday night. Nothing huge, just the 6 of us. Mom really wants you there." He paused. Then, with the practiced ease of someone who'd been running from his own messes his whole life, he added, "I know things have been a little weird lately. Let's just put it behind us. Fresh start. You know, fresh start." Like he hadn't walked into a police station and told them I was a thief. Like he hadn't been draining our parents' retirement for 3 years. Like fresh start was something he could offer instead of accountability. Sure, I said Saturday works. I hung up and called Diane. I need this done before Saturday. I had 4 days. Diane and I met on Tuesday evening at her office. She spread the full case file across her conference table, bank records, IP logs, device authentication histories, my travel timeline, the original police report, and my forensic reconstruction. It covered most of the table. "Here's where we are," she said. "Detective Marcos has enough to shift the investigation away from you entirely. He's already told my office informally that you're no longer considered a suspect. But the formal process takes time, and he hasn't moved on your brother yet because the bank records are still being verified through their fraud department. Can we accelerate that? We don't need to. What we need is for the detective to have your complete analysis, the one that connects every withdrawal to Derek's devices, cross-references dates you were out of state, and identifies the intermediary accounts Derek used to route funds to his personal credit lines. That's the piece that turns this from suspicious activity into a clear pattern of fraud." She tapped the stack of papers. "I'll deliver this to Marcos tomorrow morning along with a formal request that the charges against you be dismissed and a recommendation that the investigation be redirected. And if he says he needs more time, he won't. This is cleaner work than his department usually gets from outside counsel. You did his job for him, Isaac. He'll be grateful." I went home and didn't sleep well. Not because I was nervous the evidence was airtight. I'd verified every data point twice. But because I knew that what came next was going to blow my family apart, and no amount of spreadsheets makes that feel good. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling and thinking about Christmas when I was 12 and Derek was 9. He'd wanted this remote control car, one of those expensive hobby grade ones, and our parents couldn't swing it. I'd been saving lawn mowing money all summer. I bought it for him. He played with it for 2 months straight. Took it everywhere. Told his friends his big brother got it for him. I don't know why that memory showed up at 2:00 in the morning, but it sat there in the dark with me until I finally fell asleep. Wednesday morning, Diane delivered the file. She called me at noon. He's reviewing it now. He asked me twice if you'd done this yourself. I told him you do this for a living, and he said, and I'm paraphrasing, that this is the most organized case referral he's received from a civilian. So what's next? He finishes his review. He consults with the prosecutor's office. And based on what he's seeing, I expect him to want to talk to Derek. Before Saturday, I can't guarantee the timing on his end. But Isaac, regardless of what the detective does or doesn't do by Saturday, you're clear. The evidence exonerates you completely. Everything else is about Derek now. That should have been a relief. And in some logical part of my brain, it was. But the rest of me was thinking about my parents sitting across from Derek at that Italian restaurant on Saturday night, celebrating 40 years of marriage, and having no idea that one of their sons had been stealing from them, and the other one had just handed proof of it to the police. Thursday was quiet. I worked. I kept my phone close. Cynthia stopped by my office around lunch. "You're grinding your teeth again," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "I'm not grinding my teeth. You've been doing it since I walked in. Your jaw is clenched so tight I can see it from here." She came in and sat down. "How's the thing in motion? You want to talk about it?" I thought about it. "Not really, but I appreciate you asking." She studied me for a second. "You know, Isaac, you're allowed to be angry about this. You don't have to process it like a case file. It's the only way I know how to process it. I know. That's why I'm saying it. She stood up. Go easy on the jaw. Dental work is expensive. Around 4:00 in the afternoon, Diane texted me. Marcos has reviewed the full file. He has questions, but they're clarifying, not skeptical. He's moving forward. That night, I sat in my townhouse and thought about what I wanted. Not strategically, I'd done all the strategic thinking I was going to do. I mean personally. What outcome did I actually want? I wanted to be cleared. That was happening. I wanted Derek to face consequences. That was in motion. But what did I want with my parents? What did I want with the version of my family that had looked at me and Derek and decided without any evidence that I was the more likely thief? I didn't have a clean answer. I still don't. Friday morning, my phone rang. Detective Marcos, Mr. Mercer. I've completed my review of the materials your attorney provided. I'd like you to come in this afternoon if you're available, not as a suspect. I want to be clear about that. I need to confirm a few details in your analysis before I take next steps. I went. Same station, same interview room, same bad coffee, smell in the hallway, same buzzing fluorescent light in the lobby. But this time the folder on the table was mine. Marcos had a cup of coffee in front of him and reading glasses I hadn't seen before. He'd clearly been at this for a while. I'll be honest with you, Mr. Mercer. I've been doing this for 16 years, and I don't often get a case file from the accused party that's more thorough than anything my department produced. I wasn't exactly the accused party, but I appreciate that. He gave a small nod. Fair enough. He walked me through the transaction timeline methodically. He'd pull up a specific withdrawal date amount routing, and I'd confirm how I traced it. Device ID matching IP geolocation, the intermediary account structures, my corresponding travel records for dates where applicable. He stopped about halfway through and leaned back in his chair. You do this for a living? I do. How long have you been doing forensic work? About 9 years. He nodded slowly, looking at the file. Then he flipped to the section on the joint account, the one my mother had added Derek to for medical emergencies. This account, he said, your brother is the joint holder? Yes. And your mother added him voluntarily? As far as I know, yes. She told me it was in case my dad had a medical emergency. Marcos closed the folder, not dramatically, just the way someone does when they've seen enough to know what they need to do next. I need to make some calls. I stood up. We shook hands. He didn't tell me what those calls would be, and I didn't ask. I walked out to my car, sat in the driver's seat, and stared through the windshield at the parking lot. Tomorrow was Saturday, the anniversary dinner. I still hadn't decided whether I was going. My phone buzzed. A text from Derek. Reservations at 7:00. Vanessa says wear something nice, lol. See you there, brother. I read it twice, and I set my phone down and drove home. I went to dinner. I know some of you are screaming at your screens right now, but here's the thing. I didn't go for Derek. I didn't go for my mom. I went because my parents have been married for 40 years, and my dad, who never asked to be in the middle of any of this, deserved to have both his sons at the table for one more evening, even if it was the last one. The restaurant was nice. White tablecloths, candles, a patio overlooking the river. Vanessa had clearly picked it. She was already there when I arrived, adjusting a small bouquet of flowers she'd brought as a centerpiece. She looked up and gave me a smile that managed to be both welcoming and territorial. Isaac, you came. I wouldn't miss it. Derek stood up and shook my hand. Firm grip, direct eye contact, warm smile. The full package. If I didn't know what I knew, I'd have thought he was genuinely happy to see me. My parents arrived a few minutes later. Mom hugged me tight, and I could feel the relief in it. Relief that I was there, that I wasn't making a scene, that the family was performing normalcy. Dad clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Good to see you, bud." We ordered, we ate, we talked about Dad's garden, Vanessa's new client, a trip my parents were thinking about taking to Myrtle Beach. Derek told a story about a sales conference in Nashville that had everyone laughing. He was in peak form, charming, self-deprecating, the star of the table. I watched him work the room and thought about the spreadsheets on my backup drives. At one point during dessert, Mom reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm glad we're all together," she said, and her eyes were wet. "This is what matters." I squeezed back. I didn't say anything. We said our goodbyes in the parking lot around 9:00. I hugged my dad. I hugged my mom. I shook Derek's hand again, and I drove home, knowing it was the last time all 6 of us would ever sit at a table together like that. Monday morning, Detective Marcos called Derek and asked him to come in for a follow-up interview. I know this because Diane told me. I know what happened in the interview because it became part of the case record. Derek went in confident. Why wouldn't he? As far as he knew, the investigation was still pointed at me. Marcos asked him to walk through his original statement again, the kitchen conversation, the banking questions, the timeline. Derek repeated it all, consistent with his first version. He practiced. Then Marcos opened my file. He showed Derek the IP logs. He showed him the device authentication records. He showed him the intermediary account routing, and he showed him the 9 transaction dates where I was verifiable in a different state. Derek's attorney, he brought one which tells you he wasn't as confident as he looked, requested a break. They stepped out for 20 minutes. When they came back, Derek's attorney said his client would not be answering further questions. By Wednesday, the prosecutor's office had opened a formal investigation into Derek for theft and filing a false police report. The original complaint against me was officially closed. Diane called me with the news, and I sat in my office with the door shut and felt something I can only describe as hollow relief, like winning a game you never wanted to play. I called my mom that evening. She already knew. Derek had called her first, of course. Isaac, her voice was shaking. Derek says there's been a misunderstanding with the police. Mom, it's not a misunderstanding. He says the account was joint. He had a right to use it. He had emergency access. He used it to pay his credit card bills for 3 years, $47,000. Silence, a long one. That can't be right. I've seen the records, Mom. Every transaction, every date, every dollar. He's been draining your retirement account. And when Dad noticed the big one, Derek told you I did it. She started crying. Not the dramatic kind, the quiet, gutted kind. The kind where someone's understanding of their own family is rearranging itself in real time and nothing fits where it used to. Why didn't you tell us? She whispered. Because you wouldn't have believed me. You told me not to ruin the family over one mistake, remember? She didn't answer. I heard my dad in the background asking what was wrong. She couldn't get words out. Mom, I have to go. I'm sorry this happened. I didn't want any of it. I meant that. Over the next few weeks, things unraveled the way things do. Derek hired a defense attorney, a real one, not the guy he'd brought to the police interview. Vanessa found out the full extent of the financial situation when the legal bill started, and Derek couldn't hide anymore. From what I heard through my dad, there were a lot of doors slamming. My parents went to the bank and sat through a meeting where the fraud department walked them through every unauthorized withdrawal. My mom cried through the entire thing. My dad sat there and said almost nothing, which is how he handles everything. But it somehow felt worse this time. Derek called me once about 3 weeks after the investigation shifted. I almost didn't pick up. You couldn't have just let it go, he said. No anger exactly, more like bafflement. Like he genuinely couldn't understand why I hadn't accepted being the scapegoat. You filed a police report saying I stole from our parents, Derek. I almost got arrested at my office. I was going to pay it back. You were going to pay back $47,000. Eventually, yeah. I had a plan. Your plan was me. I was the plan. He didn't have anything to say to that. We sat in silence for about 10 seconds. Then he hung up. The legal process played out over the following months. Derek was formally charged with theft and filing a false police report. Because the account was technically joint, the theft charges got complicated. His attorney argued he had legal access, but the false report was straightforward. He'd lied to the police about me in detail on the record. There was no ambiguity about that. He eventually took a plea deal: misdemeanor theft, probation, restitution. The false report charge carried more weight. He got community service and a conviction on his record. Diane told me it was a reasonable outcome. I told her I didn't care about the legal result as much as I cared about the record being corrected. My parents and I have a relationship now, but it's different. Smaller. Honest in ways it wasn't before, which means it's also more painful. My mom calls me every week. She asked about my work, my house, and my life. She doesn't bring up Derek unless I ask, and I don't ask often. When I do, she gives me careful, measured answers. She's in therapy. My dad is too. That surprised me. About 4 months after everything settled, my dad called me on a Tuesday night. Just like the call that started all of this. Hey, bud. Hey, Dad. I owe you an apology. A real one. Not the kind where I say something vague and hope you fill in the blanks. He paused and I could hear him organizing his thoughts the way he used to organize his mail routes. Carefully, one piece at a time. I should have asked harder questions when that money went missing. I should have known you better than to believe you'd steal from us. And when you told me it wasn't you, I should have fought for you instead of letting your mother smooth it over. I failed you as a father, and I'm sorry. I stood in my kitchen with the phone against my ear and felt something loosen in my chest that had been tight for months. Thanks, Dad. That means a lot. You want to come over for dinner this weekend? Just us. No agenda, just meatloaf. Yeah, I'd like that. Derek and Vanessa separated. Last I heard, they're working on it. Maybe they'll make it. Maybe they won't. That's their story to figure out. Derek's paying restitution in monthly installments. My parents' account won't fully recover, but it won't be empty. Small mercies. As for me, I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. I wake up in my townhouse. I go to work. I come home and water my yard. I've started dating someone. Nothing serious yet, but she makes me laugh, which I'd forgotten I needed. Cynthia told me I seem lighter. I think she's right. I didn't blow up my family. My brother did that. I just followed the money. It's what I do.